Hello friends, and welcome back to Freakish Fridays. Tattooed Biker here with you. And tonight I have a collection of paranormal stories and ghostly, unexplained experiences from a young man who had a haunting college year. And he's been nice enough to send in his personal notes on the subject for us to enjoy, ponder, and discuss. So now, just kick back and enjoy the ride. Dear Tattooed Biker, I've sent you a collection of my true personal experiences from a year in college. Some of these I wrote down fresh for this email. Others I pulled from journal entries, but I've tried to arrange them in the chronological order in which they happened. I hope you and your listeners enjoy them, and I'd like to read your listeners' comments. So please, let me know if you're going to use my story in a video. Okay, here goes. While attending college, me and a few buddies decided to visit Trout Lake Norwegian Cemetery in Coleraine, as we were bored and had read a few stories online saying there was a haunted cemetery near us where a witch was buried. The post said her name was Bertha Maynard, and that she was killed in the late 1800s for being a witch because her crops were better than all the other crops in the area. We got there around 1 a.m. and struggled to find her grave, even though the cemetery was small, with only 30 graves or so. After walking around for a while, we eventually found her grave, but it was down a small hill, near the lake and away from all the other graves in the cemetery. The grave looked like it had been damaged, and all that was visible was her last name on the bottom. Side note, please don't vandalize people's graves. It's disrespectful, and it's somebody's ancestor. Apparently, this grave was stolen once, and found in a nearby lake after some high school seniors had been out drinking. After we found the grave, I whipped out my phone and started recording a video, trying to act like the Ghost Adventure people. I started asking questions, and then asked, "Bertha, please come forward and present yourself. Prove to the townspeople that you're not a witch." After I said this, wind chimes started to go off at the next closest grave behind me. I thought this was cool, so I started to film them, and when my camera finally focused in on them, they came to a screeching halt and stopped making any noise. At this point, my buddy says, "Whoa, it's not even windy enough for the chimes to go off." Shortly after that, we left the cemetery and went back home. We weren't expecting what was to follow for the next year. A week after visiting Trout Lake Cemetery, my roommate and I were sitting in my room watching TV when we decided to walk into the kitchen and grab some food. I turned into the kitchen to flip on the lights, and when I turned, I saw a black figure standing parallel to the refrigerator as if it was trying to hide alongside of it. I could see feet sticking out near the bottom and a head where our freezer is. I then looked back at my roommate standing over my shoulder and gave him a look, and when I looked back in the kitchen, the figure had disappeared. I quickly ran back to my room and grabbed my notebook and drew a sketch of what I saw. I asked my roommate if he had seen what I just saw, and he laughed at me and said, "We just visited the witch's cemetery not so long ago, and your mind is just playing tricks on you." For the next few months, he kept making fun of me, never agreeing with me about what we saw anytime the conversation came up. Finally, it was the day I was moving out, and before I left, he came up to me and said, "Hey, we need to talk before you leave. Do you still have the picture of the black figure you saw in the kitchen?" I was pretty annoyed and was thinking that he was going to make fun of me again. But instead, he apologized, saying that he actually saw the same black figure that I did, but due to his religious beliefs, he couldn't get himself to accept what he had seen that day, and said that it went against what he previously believed. He said he just kept telling himself it was fake because he didn't believe in ghosts. He wanted to apologize again and tell me that I wasn't crazy. When I showed him the picture, he agreed with 100% certainty that he had saw the same thing as me. Quite often, while sitting in my dorm bedroom, I would occasionally see black orbs floating for just a second or two, and they would show up in my Snapchat pictures often, but only when I was in my dorm apartment, never when I was away from my room. One night, a friend came to visit and spent the night, and we were up talking, and I noticed that she kept glancing down the hallway. I asked her what was up, and she said, "I don't want to sound weird, but there's this black ball that keeps floating from the kitchen to the bathroom, and I've noticed it many times." I didn't tell her about the weird stuff happening lately, because I didn't want to freak her out, so I just acted confused. I did end up seeing it once that night too, after she mentioned it. I also had a third roommate, who would randomly see a white mist in the apartment, pass through occasionally. But I never personally witnessed this, but he claimed it happened many times. It had been about 2 months since we had visited the cemetery, and 12 other people who lived on the same floor as me and whom I was friends with started coming up to me with creepy and unexplainable stories of their own. It became so frequent that I started writing down everyone's experiences and had a half-full notebook. I kept detailed accounts with dates and times. I no longer have the notebook as I burned it one night a few years ago. I felt like I had to burn it because I would have creepy things happen to me at my new apartment as well as my childhood home. After the creepy things would happen, I'd always randomly stumble upon the notebook. Creepy, paranormal things have stopped completely in my life since burning the notebook, and so I feel good that I did that. I can say that doing that helped close that chapter in my life. One day after work, I checked my phone, and I had a bunch of missed calls and messages from the girl who lived across the hall, asking if she could spend the night with me. I called her, and she told me that all day she kept hearing somebody walking around in the kitchen and dropping pots and pans. She said she kept walking out there and would see nothing out of place, and never saw anyone. She brushed it off as nothing until she was taking some selfies, and a girl appeared in the doorway of her room. She said the girl was about 5'5", which was slightly shorter than her, and had jeans on with a t-shirt and her hair up in a bun. The girl stopped in her doorway, looked at her for a few seconds, and then walked into her roommate's room, moving through the door even though it was closed. When I got home, she was waiting in the lobby, and she looked pale white and had anxiety. After that, she said she always heard weird noises in her apartment and would constantly hear footsteps in the hallway, but never saw her again. One night, I was sitting at home alone when I got a knock on my door, and as I answered the door, I saw it was 2 girls who used to live across the hall from me the year prior. These girls both lived in the same room where my friend saw the Snapchat girl. They asked how things were going in the dorms, and I said that things had been kind of weird lately, and just left it at that. The one girl spoke up and said, "Oh, you must be talking about the ghosts." I then asked how they heard about all the stuff happening, and they said they hadn't heard anything, but when they lived across the hall, they would hear things all the time in that dorm, and things always sounded like they were being moved, and could hear people talking quietly in their dorm while at the same time hearing footsteps. They both agreed that they were glad to be out of there and assumed stuff was still happening. I asked them if they wanted to come in, but they said they were just passing through town and felt the need to check in. I watched them leave and was super confused. What's weird about all this that we weren't close at all, and we would only exchange pleasantries in the hallway the year prior, so when they left for the night, it had me questioning things. Like, if they're in a rush, why come and visit me at all? And out of all the people to visit, why not visit some of your close friends that still live here? Just before all this stuff started happening, I met this girl who lived down the hall. And let's just say she had tons of weird stuff happening to her quite frequently. There was a couple of times her roommate came up to me asking about her. They shared a dorm room. Because during the night, she would be kneeling on the lofted bed, rocking it side to side aggressively, while mumbling nonsense. And when she'd try to talk to her or wake her up, the mumbling would just get louder. Whenever her roommate would ask her about this, the girl down the hall would have no idea what she was talking about and could never quite remember it. I remember one Saturday, her roommate came up to me again and asked what was up with the girl down the hall last night. I said, "What do you mean? She's at her parents' house this weekend." She said, "No, she's not. Last night she was sitting in the corner of her bed just staring at me and whispering to herself." I tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't respond. When she told me this, I thought she was crazy, so I said, "Nope, she was at her parents' last night." I walked her out to her car and watched the girl down the hall leave. She said, "Well, somebody was chilling in her bed last night." After getting to know the girl down the hall, she too would also talk about always hearing people in her kitchen late at night, and would say that things are being thrown around her room, like books randomly falling off her desk or chairs moving by themselves. She said that she would wake up and her paperwork was often crumpled up in the middle of the room. I remember she would always find things missing, like her keys, headphones, and wallet. She would be unable to find them, and then randomly they would appear a day or so later, lying perfectly in the middle of the room. This girl always wanted to go for walks at night through the cemetery across the road from campus, which usually didn't bother me, but given all the weird stuff happening to her, I would start to go less and less frequently, even though I really enjoyed hanging out with her. By far, the scariest story she told was that one day before leaving for a family vacation, she was sitting downstairs, watching a movie, and when she stood up, she looked in the mirror and saw an old man sitting in the chair she was just in. She looked back at the chair and no one was there. Then looked in the mirror and the old man was sitting there again, just staring at her with a glazed over look. One day her and her family left for vacation, and when she returned, she said there was a VHS sleeve sitting on the floor and it said her name, followed by baptism video. She called me and was freaked out because A, she didn't realize that she even had a baptism video and had never seen it because her family didn't own a VCR anymore. B, she spent hours searching the house and couldn't find the VHS that fits inside the sleeve. I asked if someone broke into the house and she said no, nothing else is missing, and we live in the middle of nowhere, 20 minutes to the nearest tiny town, so why would anyone drive all this way just to steal a baptism video? And who would have even known that it existed? After that VHS went missing, she kept saying that she would hear an old man asking for help when she was home alone. Maybe the guy she saw in the mirror? I'm not sure, and neither was she. She finally brought all of this stuff up to her parents, and her mom said, "I used to experience a lot of explained things and see people in the house that weren't real when you were a kid. I just never said anything because you never asked." While all this stuff was happening, we had a group chat going that consisted of about 12 of us, most of us living on the second floor of our hall. I'd say at least once every other day, somebody was messaging the group with some unexplained story or some weird, creepy thing that had just happened to them. Most of the stories consisted of hearing people walking around in their dorms or bedrooms. But the strange thing is the fact that nobody had stories that took place outside the hall. I also understand that we lived in a dorm apartment building, so you have to take certain noises with a grain of salt, because college students are loud and drunk sometimes, and this causes things to happen unintentionally. I haven't been back in the building since I left, but I'd be curious to spend the night, or even visit just to see if I get the same feeling or similar experiences. And that's what I have so far. Thanks for taking the time to read this. Signed, Sebastian. And there it is. a true spooky collection of real-world paranormal experiences. I'd like to say thanks, Sebastian, for sending this in, and thanks to my viewer family for watching. If you have an experience or an encounter that you'd like to share, send it to me, sparing no details, and it may just make it into a video. I'll be sure and email you back if I'm about to use it, and you can find my email address in the description of this video. So thanks again. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.